What happens when a woman mocked for asking for a plate becomes the face of a movement? You won't believe how her speech left an entire city in stunned silence. And that was only the beginning. On the corner of Santa Monica and Vine, where a cup of coffee costs more than a week's supply of instant noodles, and where finding parking is about as real as unicorns, she stood, not like a statue, number like a question mark that life hadn't answered yet. Her name was Tiana Jones, 23, skin the color of roasted hazelnuts, eyes that had seen too much too early, and a voice so soft it could have been mistaken for prayer, if not for the fire behind it. She wasn't loud. Life had long ago taught her that volume didn't buy respect. What did? Standing your ground when everything in the world screamed for you to disappear. Her hands were clean, not in the metaphorical sense, but literally. Cracked and dry, yes, but scrubbed raw in a shelter sink that smelled like bleach and despair. She didn't come for charity. She wasn't asking for mercy or leftovers. Today she had one goal: to eat like a human being. With a plate, a fork, not squatting behind a trash bin, scooping cold food out of a greasy bag. Number, not today. The cafe was called Silver Table. Ironic, really, because there was nothing silver about how they treated people unless your wallet sparkled. It was one of those boho faux organic spots where freelancers pretend to be novelists and marketing execs wear beanies indoors like they're still in college. White tablecloths, water served like champagne, and prices designed to keep folks like Tiana outside, watching through the glass like kids at a candy shop. But today she walked in. Not boldly, let's not kid ourselves, but upright, with a spine forged in the fire of 1,000 rejections. Her sweatshirt was faded, her jeans stiff with wear, and her backpack looked like it had survived a war zone. She walked to the counter, every step deliberate, every second a gamble against humiliation. The waiter looked up, white button down rolled to the elbows, hair gelled like he had somewhere to be on reality TV, and that signature sneer of someone who thought working there made him elite. Uh, hey, she began, voice dry, lips trembling slightly. He was already scanning her, not with curiosity, with calculation, like TSA deciding whether you're worth the trouble of a full-body pat-down. I'm not asking for food, she clarified quickly, eyes darting. If it's okay, I brought my own fork and spoon and a plate. I just want to wash them. I want to eat outside but not off the ground, that's all. Silence, the kind that hangs like humidity before a storm. Then came the laughter, sharp, loud, cruel. Y'all hearing this? He turned, smirking at the barista. She wants to wash her own dishes. Her own. In our restaurant. Ain't that the sweetest thing? Someone at a nearby table chuckled nervously. A woman in a navy pantsuit pulled out her phone. Red record light flickered. Oh yes, the scene had begun. Tiana didn't flinch, didn't look away. Her lips pressed together like the seal on an envelope of secrets. She had seen this performance before, knew her role in it, be the punchline, the pitiful, the oh, bless her heart, but she stood there anyway. I just asked, she said quietly, almost to herself. Not demanded, not begged. Oh, sweetheart. The waiter leaned in with that syrupy tone used on toddlers and women being denied their dignity. If we let every stray walk in here playing civilized, we'd have a line around the block. That's when the mood shifted. Because in the back corner of the cafe, where the light barely reached and the wine cost more than rent in East LA, sat a man. Not just any man. Aaron Matthews, billionaire, founder, owner. The one whose name was on the lease, the payroll, the branding, and the wine menu. 50-ish, salt and pepper beard trimmed like it had its own assistant, and a custom suit that whispered old money. He'd been watching, listening, and when that laugh echoed again from the waiter, Aaron stood up. No drama, no theatrics, just the kind of movement that made people stop stirring their oat milk lattes. He walked over to the counter with the slow, terrifying calm of someone used to ending careers over espresso. Miss, he said to Tiana, voice even, eyes steady. You said you have your own utensils? Yes, sir, she replied, confused but still composed. Then please, take a seat. I'll bring your meal myself. The room froze as the waiter blinked. Wait, what? Are you serious? Aaron turned to him without missing a beat. You're fired. What? Wait, seriously? For this? No, Aaron said, stepping closer. For not being a decent human being. And in this place, that's a job requirement. You could hear forks hit plates. The waiter's face drained faster than a bathtub after last call. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, Holy hell, that's the owner. Twitter was already catching fire. Aaron turned back to Tayana. May I recommend the lentil soup with thyme? It's warm and worth the wait. She nodded, stunned. Thank you, anything's fine. He nodded once and walked away. A minute later he returned, with a tray, soup, fresh bread, a cloth napkin, water in a glass that sparkled like crystal, even though Tayana's hands trembled too much to lift it right away. She sat and ate, slowly, not from fear, but from reverence. Real food, real respect, real moment. The camera phones were still rolling, but this wasn't about them. This was about her, reclaiming the tiniest sliver of dignity in a world that treated people like her as shadows. The fired waiter stood near the door, frozen, betrayed by a reality he didn't see coming, that his cruelty wasn't just distasteful, it was unemployable. But the real twist? Tayana stood when she was done, walked to the back counter, quietly placed her used utensils next to the sink. I'll still wash them, like I said I would. And she did, thoroughly, gracefully, without a word of anger, because dignity doesn't scream, it endures. Then she walked out. The air outside was crisp, like justice, if justice had a scent. What she didn't know was that the video had already gone viral, that hashtags were forming, that her name would trend, that interviews, podcasts, and op-eds were coming, that a foundation, Silver Table Foundation, would be born within a week. No, she didn't know any of that. She only knew one thing. Today she didn't bow her head. She sat. She ate. She stood tall. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like a person. What happened next changed everything. And you won't want to miss what unfolds when dignity collides with power. Stay tuned. The next morning, Los Angeles woke up with a new kind of hero, one whose rifle of dignity pierced straight through the brutal visuals of week-old sidewalks and too expensive lattes, and as the morning news anchor said, less glibly but no less forcefully, a heroine with a dirty fork but a conscience scrubbed cleaner than this city's expectations. Every social feed lit on fire like kindling under wind, declaring her both emblem of hope and target for unsolicited judgment. And yet amidst the wildfire, there she was. Tayana, phone nowhere in sight, network connection non-existent, and no awareness whatsoever that her quiet stand would morph into a movement. But that morning she woke up in a decommissioned school bus that smelled of old upholstery and people who had traded warmth for safety. And next to her, folded neatly, was that scrap of paper, 2 lines in precise, controllingly male handwriting. You deserve more. M. She scoffed inwardly, not at the message but at the messenger, thinking wryly that she trusted cockroaches more than she did wealthy white men with soft hearts. But even she couldn't deny the ripple that had begun. She had to move, because moving felt better than letting life loop on silent replay, and because waiting too long could unravel even the tightest of souls. She headed to the Old City Library, the downtown relic where rumor had it they'd opened a job posting for a nighttime archivist. Not a glamorous gig, but a sanctuary from the streets and a chance to be seen as more than a footnote. She entered that old building with a posture that whispered self-preservation, collar straightened as though she could wardrobe herself into belonging, though every thread on her body told a different story. Fines from giveaway boxes and charity racks, worn with dignity but not without stigma. At the desk sat Mrs. Peterson, a woman whose eyebrows hadn't seen nuance since disco era, and whose expression suggested Tayana's very presence was an act of affliction. Tayana cleared her throat and said in careful English, "Good morning. I'd like to apply for the open archivist position." She handed over her documents, neatly folded, and waited. Mrs. Peterson looked down her nose. "And your address," she snapped without meeting Tayana's eyes, as though eviction notices were a badge of moral failure. I'm temporarily without a permanent address, Tiana replied evenly, but I have work history, references. Mrs. Peterson sneered in a way that froze warmth in the air. We are a library, not a shelter. We do not hire people who are temporarily housed. Tiana resisted taking the bait emotionally. With respect, would you review my qualifications? Mrs. Peterson waved a dismissive hand. Perhaps you'd like to review the waiting line, she said, though behind her there was only a solitary ficus pot and a guard softly snoring. The cruelty disguised as policy slammed into Tiana like a book dropped on your head. You don't expect kindness, but you hope for fairness. Tiana retrieved her papers and turned to leave. At the door, a young black man with shoulder-length locks and a t-shirt proclaiming, "Knowledge is power," called out, "That stands, sis. You got people behind you." He flashed a supportive grin before walking off. She nodded once, silence her only reply. Getting turned away wasn't a new wound, but it stung deeper when you'd already bled from so many others. Still, the hurt was murmured, not screamed, because public agonies rarely fit on the evening news, and survival often meant swallowing the ache. She found a bus stop not far away and waited for the next ride, carrying both her pride and her bruises like a hidden suitcase. That's when they showed up. 3 kids in designer sneakers and snapshots of privilege bigger than their egos. 2 of them recognized her face from the viral clip, and their eyes gleamed with that weird combination of self-righteous cruelty and boredom. The one with the newest smartphone lifted it and said with smirk, "Hey, you from the Fork video, right? Want to autograph a napkin?" Another chimed in, "Or a tutorial, how to be broke but proud." They laughed, hard and loud, the kind of laughter that felt like punches. One of them tossed an empty fast food box at her feet, laughter trailing behind it like mockery. She looked at them, looked at the trash on the pavement, then stooped and picked up the box. With a single motion, she carried it to the nearest bin, cleaner on the inside than anything they'd ever throw away. The bin closed, she stood tall, and in that moment, the unfiltered truth of dignity carried more weight than any insult. Then came the quiet roar of an engine. A sleek, black Lincoln pulled over. Tiana stood still, halfway between humiliation and question marks, when the window rolled down and out stepped him, Aaron Matthews. "Ms. Jones," he said, voice resonant but cautious. "Glad I found you." She folded her arms and said without sugar, "Yeah, well, I'm not sure I am." He nodded. "I need your answer. Not for a photo op, not for a tweet, but for work, real responsibility, real compensation. A program aimed at homeless women that's not charity, but structured aid with pay, training, legal help. And I want you to be its face, its coordinator, paid, in office." She searched his eyes in that moment, as if behind them stood the entire weight of that first bowl of soup and the bowl of shame and the future she hadn't seen coming. "Why me?" she asked quietly, like whispering into a storm. "Because you didn't break," he said. "Because what you maintain can't be bought, and because the system trembles when people rise after being shoved." She thought of fire, of flame, of whether this could scorch her again. "Okay," she said finally. "But no glossy bullshit or stage scenes. I'm not a display piece. I'm a person." He nodded like a warrior who's found his co-general. 2 days later, she sat in a proper conference room, not under a fluorescent strip light in a shelter, not behind an orange cone pointing toward a dumpster. She was at a real desk with a laptop, badge clipped to her coat, credentials glowing with quiet promise. In the hall, a line of women, each once overlooked, each once dismissed, waited for their turn with people who finally saw them as humans, not headlines. But this kind of breakthrough never comes glare-free. On day 4, she saw him again. Kyle, the old waiter, his pride stripped, eyes raw and red as something left rot behind them. He fidgeted at the threshold, clearly still unraveling over being fired, over being unmasked. He cleared his throat and said haltingly, "I wanted to say I'm sorry." She smelled the fear, the shame, the unsent realness of a man collapsing under his own callousness. But her leveling voice said, "It's too late for drive-through mistakes. Some errors don't fit in corners." She walked past him, steps deliberate, each one sealing the distance between us in ugly remnants. Her words weren't wild, they were precise. This isn't a drive-through. You don't rewind it or reheat it. This is life. And that right there was the emotional climax. She didn't shout. She didn't rehearse speeches. She spoke truth, clipped and final, an echo of every step she'd taken from that corner on Santa Monica to this boardroom where her name carried weight. You feel it, don't you? The shift when a woman stands in the middle of judgment and instead of shrinking, she channels that spite into power. Instead of breaking, she built the crux of change. And the best part? The victory isn't just hers. It's everybody's whose dignity has been calibrated by someone else's bigger wallet or sharper tongue. Stay with her for the next chapter. It's the real reckon. If anybody thought Tiana Jones was just going to be a pretty face on a flyer or a tagline next to a charity logo, they were about to learn something crucial. She didn't come from silk sheets and soft landings. She wasn't born to decorate anyone's campaign. Tiana was that rusted-out key that still turns the lock when the world says, "You're broken." The kind of woman who didn't fit into the frame because she was too busy building her own damn house from the pieces left behind by people who stopped caring. 2 weeks had passed since she officially stepped into the office of the foundation, not as a client, not as a recipient, but as staff. She didn't march in wearing designer blouses or polished heels. She walked in with secondhand boots and the kind of memory that kept her humble. But within those 2 weeks, she had memorized every janitor's name, knew which receptionist worked double shifts, and exactly when the night guard Carl had his knee surgery scheduled. Why? Because she saw people, not from a boardroom, not from a photo op, but from down in the trenches, from alleyways and bench beds. She knew what hunger sounded like when it echoed through your ribs. She knew the cold smell of public water fountains and what it felt like to breathe in fear every night like secondhand smoke. And that made her dangerous, not to people, but to the system. One quiet evening, when the building was empty and the only noise was the soft ping of an unanswered email, Aaron Matthews stepped into her office. Not as the boss, but as a man who had finally realized who really held the compass in this place. "I want you to speak at the press conference," he said. "No fluff, just facts. City officials will be there. Press cameras, everyone." She raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "So you want another viral moment? Another poster girl to stand beside some tech investor while he fakes empathy for headlines?" "No," he said. "I want you to tell the truth. No script, no edits." Her eyes narrowed. She was testing him. If it was a trap, he just passed the test. "Then warm up the mic." The day of the press conference was unnervingly clear, like even the sky had decided, let her have her moment. The room buzzed with tension, the kind that hung heavy between white linen suits and polished patent leather shoes. Security whispered into headsets, camera crews set up angles, and somewhere a reporter rehearsed their intro with plastic sincerity. And then there was her, not draped in luxury. She wore a navy blouse that she found at a thrift sale and a blazer borrowed from a friend who understood struggle. No glitz, just grit. In her hands, a folded piece of paper. But her eyes? Her eyes said, "I don't need to read. I lived it." "Good morning," she began, voice calm but weighty. "My name is Tiana Jones. I used to be homeless. That was until a plate." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was surgical. It sliced through the audience like truth through hypocrisy. Some people don't believe that humiliation can be served on porcelain. I do. I know it. Because all I asked for that day was to clean a plate, my own, so I could eat like a person. Not like a burden, not like garbage, just like a person. She paused. You could hear someone clear their throat. Another scribbled notes faster. A third just looked down. Yes, a waiter got fired that day. But this story ain't about him. It's about what happens when the system sees dignity as a threat. When silence is expected, but someone finally says, "No more." The air in the room was no longer oxygen. It was revelation. I am not a symbol. I am not a headline. I am a warning. Because the woman you stepped over yesterday could have been your accountant, your daughter's teacher, your mother's nurse, but instead she's washing her hands in a public restroom because she's afraid of asking for a fork. Not because she's weak, but because this city trained her to disappear. She let the paper fall gently onto the podium, then looked up. If you think this ends with a speech and polite applause, you're wrong. This is the first drumbeat. The march just started. The room didn't erupt, it stilled. Respect isn't always loud. It rises in waves of realization. And then someone stood, then another, and another. Not for show, but because they felt it. Not her pain, but her truth. The next day wasn't filled with applause, it came with threats. City Hall called. Your statement has created disruption, a grim voice said. People are demanding reform. We don't have the funds. We don't have the authority. Tayana didn't flinch. Number, you don't have a conscience. You've got funds, just not for us. We could cut ties with the foundation, freeze assets. You do that, she said, her voice like iron cooled in resolve, and I'll leak your budget report, especially that $40,000 spent on your new desk. Then you'll be holding meetings on folding chairs just like the rest of us. They didn't like it, but they heard her loud and clear. Within a week, the foundation launched 3 new centers, one in South LA, one in East LA, and one in Inglewood. Places often called rough neighborhoods by folks who'd never stepped foot inside. Areas avoided by investors unless they came with PR teams and security guards. But now these neighborhoods had doors open, services running, women welcomed, and Tayana ran point. Clipboard in one hand, coffee in the other, she walked those halls like a general who knew every soldier. Because she wasn't giving out charity, she was rebuilding dignity, piece by piece, like someone who remembered how it felt to be shattered. But her real moment didn't come with cameras or applause. It came on a regular Tuesday. She was walking home, not to a mansion, but to a room. A place with a lock, a key, 4 walls and silence that didn't threaten. Her space, and on a street corner near her building, she saw him. Kyle, the waiter, now jobless, deflated. Not because he lost money, but because he lost something he thought was unshakable. Superiority. I lost everything, he said quietly, eyes red, lips dry. No, she answered, her voice not cruel but cold with reality. You only lost what you never actually owned. Your arrogance. He stood there, wrecked. Not by her words, but by the fact that she meant them. I haven't eaten, he muttered. She opened her bag and pulled out an apple. Start here, then go help someone else. Not for likes, not for show. Just because. He took it, no words, just silence. That night, Tayana sat at her desk, watching the city through the foggy window. The skyline didn't intimidate her anymore. It didn't tower. It stood like a monument she had outgrown. She wasn't an outsider. She wasn't a survivor. She was a builder. She hadn't changed the whole system. Not yet. But she gave others a reason to stand up, to take their piece back. And if the world didn't make room for her, she'd craft a place out of whatever scraps she had. Dignity doesn't come in gold. It's shaped by scars, refined by fire, and carried by those who refuse to disappear. If you followed this far, remember this. Nobody has the right to tell you what you're worth. Sometimes a plate is all it takes to start a revolution. And sometimes a woman they try to erase becomes the headline they can't bury.